In the studio with me, Alec MacGillis, the senior editor for The New Republic, a fine publication,
it is.
And the website tnr.com. And Alec, you guys have been doing some really, really extraordinary reporting on. First of all, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. And you've been doing some extraordinary reporting on election, not voter fraud, election fraud, or the attempt to rig elections in advance. This even goes beyond the old, maybe it's an apocryphal Stalin quote. It doesn't matter who votes, it matters who counts the votes.
Right.
In this case, it matters who is allowed to vote.
Exactly.
So tell us about it.
Well, I spent a while out in Ohio a few weeks ago. Ohio is obviously where this whole thing may come down to, and it's really been the battleground all year for a whole bunch of fights over who's going to get to vote in November. We've heard a lot about some of these other laws in other states that have been struck down, laws that require people to have voter ID, photo ID at the polls. A lot of those laws were put on hold or struck down, and so I think a lot of people think that this isn't that big of an issue this year. Actually, in Ohio, which is going to matter more than any other state, there's been a lot of fights on sort of smaller, seemingly more minor things that actually could have a real impact, such as the fight over early voting. Early voting is a really big deal in Ohio. It's been going on there for the last 8 years, 6 years. It's a way to reduce lines on election day in the cities where often in the past you had long lines and a lot of Democrats, minority voters, were not able to vote.
People in 2000 and 2004 famously standing in the rain, I think
Exactly.
it was the 2004 election, for 10 hours.
Right, Cleveland, Columbus, not getting their votes counted.
Yeah.
And so they instituted early voting as a remedy for that, but there's been this nonstop fight over just how much early voting to allow. And this year in Ohio, the Republicans successfully have cut back on the early voting hours, not as much as they would have liked, but quite successfully. And so basically a lot of weekends that you would have been able to vote back in 2008, which the Democrats used to great advantage, were not available to them this year. And so that's been a very big fight that I followed out there. There are other fights over early voting locations. I was in Toledo, fifth biggest city in the state, where the Republican elections officials wanted to put the early voting location in a town 9 miles from Toledo that is 1/20th the size of Toledo and is entirely white, which would have obviously made it much tougher for the large minority population in Toledo to get to that location.
Right. Particularly people without cars.
Right.
We're talking with Alec MacGillis, the senior editor of The New Republic, tnr.com. And just back to the early voting in general, first of all. Husted, is his first name John?
John, yes.
John Husted, the Secretary of State. He's the one who has been fighting this, the
Right.
Republican Secretary of State. My recollection is that when finally the Supreme Court said, no, sorry, we're not going to hear your appeal, you're going to have early voting, he said, okay, then we will do it with very limited hours, and we're going to stagger those hours from day to day so that if somebody votes in the morning one day and then goes back to their community and says, hey, I 10 o'clock this morning, I went out and voted, so their neighbors or their friends will say, oh, cool, I'll go out at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, and they're going to get there and the polls will be closed, because how does this work?
Well, exactly. The Supreme Court did refuse to hear his appeal. This was just for the final weekend that was in question. In this case, the final weekend before the election, the Republicans lost this appeal, but as a result, he just went ahead and set these quite narrow hours, more narrow than what they'd had.
It's like 8 to 2 on Fridays and 2 to 6 on Saturday,
exactly.
or something like that.
There's sort of odd hours.
Yeah.
And again, the other weekends that prior to the final weekends all throughout this month in October, where you were allowed to vote in 2008, you were not allowed to vote this time. Husted made sure that all weekends prior to the final weekend were closed to voting this time around.
So people cannot vote last weekend.
Exactly.
They cannot vote.
Exactly.
Well, next weekend. Next
weekend is the final.
Yeah, it's the final one.
The big question really is whether the Obama campaign will have managed to get their people out on the weekdays since they were not able to rely on the weekends this year.
It's going to be a big challenge when, the plutocrats, the Republicans, by and large, they're appealing to people who have white-collar jobs. They can take a day off more easily or half a day. Or entrepreneurs, or just simply rich people. Hey,
Sure.
I can go.
No,
it's polls.
what you're looking at here.
But if you're a bus driver,
right,
and you're trying to take your day off,
this whole election's really about turnout. If you look at the polls, what you see again and again is that Obama's ahead under registered voters. Under likely voters, what the pollsters deem to be people who really will come to the polls, it's tied. So the whole question is whether Obama gets out those people who may or may not vote.
Right.
And so any way that you make voting more convenient through early voting or what have you makes it more likely that you're going to get those people who are on the edge. And so any attempts for Republicans, it's very important to make it less convenient to vote because it's the Democratic voters who are going to be, as a result, going to be less likely to vote.
Well, and this is nothing new.
Right.
I mean, this is what literacy tests were all about in the late 19th and early 20th century. Post-Reconstruction. This is what the poll taxes were all about. This is what restricted voting hours, for that matter, were all about.
And I think it's become more dramatic now, though, because of the demographic split we're seeing now, where the Republicans have, despite the efforts of Karl Rove and others who wanted to build more of a Big Ten kind of party, have really failed to diversify themselves. So this is sort of the last election they can hope to win with a very, very white base and a white electorate.
Right.
And they're going to be looking at, to win this year, they're going to need to push their share of the white vote above 60%. And it's going to be really become much harder in years down the line to try to do this. This is the last year they have a shot of doing this, basically winning with very, very little minority vote.
Right.
And one way to do that is to make sure that the minority vote on the other side is not too high.
And in fact, in 2000, I was reading today in the New York Times, and correct me if my recollection of the numbers are wrong. I was reading it on my flight in from Chicago this morning, that in 2000, 13% of the electorate was minority, and right now it's going to be about twice that, more or less 25%.
Yeah, I think actually it was a little bit earlier. It was 92 when Clinton first won. That it was about 13%.
92. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you for that correction. But nonetheless, what's happened is
It's
that
doubled.
basically in a
Doubled in 20 years.
generation,
Right.
we've seen this very significant demographic shift. And here's the thing: if they succeed in rigging these elections in a way that they can put Mitt Romney into office, then he puts a couple more Scalias on the Supreme Court, and then voting rights and law issues come before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court can tighten down the screws in ways that'll make it even harder for minorities to vote in the future.
Well,
I mean, this is all about maintaining the plutocracy.
I'm sorry to say that. I don't think they even need any more votes. John Roberts has made clear that in the next year, they're going to be looking at the Voting Rights Act, which is how the feds are allowed to look at Southern voting laws. And he seems intent on striking down that law or parts of that law. And he probably has the votes to do it now.
But it's, Kennedy, Justice Kennedy is the swing vote. He's the fifth vote. He's the weak sister among the five right wings. And he's, 74 years old,
Right.
I believe, and not at the best of health. I mean, he's rather frail.
No, Ginsburg.
Ginsburg is in real trouble, but she's not the swing vote. I mean,
Right.
she's a reliable progressive vote. Mitt Romney would clearly, replace her.
Sure.
But it's like there's that possibility. I mean, well, I guess we'll have to see how this shakes out. We have just a little less than a minute left. We're talking with Alec MacGillis, the senior editor at the New Republic. TNR.com is the website. What can people do?
I think people just really need to. People who care about this need to vote, but they also need to make sure they get everyone out to vote. It's just so basic. I mean, it's the one day of the year where you do have more power than the big guys because you have more numbers, and it's just so simple.
Right. Show up.
Right.
Get out there. Get active. Vote.
Right.
Especially if you're in Ohio. Okay. Alec MacGillis. Thank you, Alec.
Thank you.
It's great having you with us. We'll be right back.